Hi, everyone, and welcome to Seed Speaks. This is a video series brought to you by Seed World Group. My name is Marc Zienkiewicz, and I am an editor with Seed World Group. And this month, we're talking about myths and myth busting. I'm joined today by Ali Roden, digital content producer for Seed World Group, which covers the global seed industry. Ali's based in Tennessee and is 22 years old. I'm also joined by Tyler Heppel, production manager for Heppel's Potatoes in British Columbia. Tyler is 28. We'll also hear from Ali Churko, a 20-year-old university student in Alberta who grew up in the seed industry. Now, the reason I'm mentioning everybody's ages today is because today's theme is misinformation about agriculture, specifically how young people are combating it. I wanted to talk with some young people about how they're reaching out to the wider world to combat myths about what we do in the ag world. Ali and Tyler, welcome. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Doing fantastic.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Now, studies show that the biggest demographic of social media users are people under 30. So, statistically, the older you are, the less likely you are to use social media. Only 40% of people age 65 and older use social media. 90% of people aged 18 to 29 use it. Now, that's a significant difference. And so, who better to advise us on this than some young people like yourselves, right? So, your backgrounds are both very different. Now, Ali, you don't come from an ag background, but you now work with a company that covers the agriculture industry, specifically seed. A big portion of your day, Ali, goes to managing the Seed World Group social media accounts. Tyler, you live and breathe farming as a member of Heppel's Potatoes. You also have a huge following on TikTok. You have like 355,000 followers. That's crazy. And so we'll get to that in a moment. But before we talk with you guys, we're going to hear from Ali Churko. She couldn't join us live, but I recorded a brief chat with her the other day. Now, Ali Churko grew up in the seed sector. Her dad is Chris Churko, CEO of FP Genetics. So she's grown up in seed industry circles, and she's going to the University of Alberta right now studying genetics. So we're going to hear from Ali. We talked for about 5 minutes, and she's sort of going to set the stage for our chat that we're going to have in a moment. So let's hear from Ali first. Well, thank you, Ali, for joining me today on Seed Speaks.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you are actually originally from Saskatchewan. You currently live in Alberta.
For school.
You're going to university in Alberta. And can you remind me, what are you studying?
So I'm in a Bachelor of Science. My major is in biology. And then I like to focus kind of more on genetics. That's kind of my vibe.
Now, you sort of grew up in the seed industry. You grew up on a farm. Your dad is actually on the board of Seeds Canada, one of our national seed organizations. And so you've kind of grown up in agriculture. You've sort of lived and breathed it for a long time. And our topic this week on Seed Speaks is misinformation about agriculture and social media and how young people are combating that. You're currently 20 years old, correct?
Yeah, yep.
Now, I'm curious to know, you're going to school right now, you're a full-time student, very busy. Do you encounter a lot of misinformation about agriculture at school and just like in the world in general?
Yeah, I think there's, in this day of technology, there's just so much information out there. It's hard not to be surrounded by it. And then in my daily life, I think there's definitely across disciplines a lot of misinformation. Most people I've encountered in farming communities or in the sciences usually have a good grasp on what's fact versus what is fiction. But as soon as you stray from that even a little bit, and even like, within those disciplines, there's just definitely a lot of misinformation, trying to find like trusted sources when you're making an opinion. Very difficult. So I definitely see it around a lot. And as I think technology continues to grow, so will this misinformation spread.
And what are some of the big sources of misinformation that you encounter? Are there one or two things that are sort of recurring themes in that area?
Yeah, so I think the biggest ones that I encounter are GMOs, the use of CRISPR within plants, CRISPR in general too, and then the topic of organics versus products grown with pesticides and herbicides. Those are definitely, I think, the three biggest ones that I encounter. But I also know, there's debates about whether or not farming is actually harming the earth and stuff like that. But yeah, those are my main three that I encounter.
So, as somebody who grew up in the seed world, who obviously knows, you know full well when you hear something that's not correct, that, oh, actually, like, that's not the way it actually is, and you naturally, I'm sure, want to engage people in conversation and try and correct them where possible. That, I grew up in this, so actually I know that that's not true. How do you do that in a constructive way so that you don't make people feel defensive or alienated? How do you generally engage them in conversation in a productive way?
Yeah, so I think in pretty much any encounter, whether or not you know the person you're speaking with, it's pretty easy to gauge whether the person is interested in learning or the person has made up their mind. If someone has made up their mind, whether it's scientifically founded or just something they've kind of come up with, if they're not willing to learn, they'll take that as law and there's no changing that, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of like if you're debating politics. If someone's not willing to hear the other side, they're not willing to. But for those that are willing to learn, I think a big thing is if you understand the science and why maybe what they're saying is incorrect, if you can try and explain it in a way that they'll understand, I think that's really helpful. And then I think in general, it's really helpful to try and point them into a good direction. Maybe getting your news from Facebook isn't the best. Maybe you should look at a scientific study, or if you can find something from Agriculture Canada, stuff like that, it'll really boost their understanding of the topic, while also keeping it civil. You're not trying to go out there and say, I understand better than you. You're not that smart or something, something that could be taken as a defensive mechanism, but something that'll help them understand going forward.
Speaking of Facebook and social media in general, do you find with social media now that the problem of misinformation is getting worse, or can social media actually be helpful in a way because we can communicate the truth really easily to large segments of the population? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think you have kind of a fun mix. So whenever you read a news article or something like that, it's so easy to just share it onto social media. So the problem with that is, sometimes you're gonna share a really great study or experiment, or a new technology. And sometimes you're going to be sharing something that has no basis. And sometimes it's really hard to tell. In classes I'm taking right now, we've actually have certain days of just going over how can you decide what study is credible? Let's look at those sources, the secondary sources. But a lot of people aren't going to do that when you're just going to go share something. So I think you got to take everything with a grain of salt on social media because, like I said, some of it's going to be great and exciting and new, and some of it is going to be not founded in anything.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a mixed bag, social media. It's just good for people to be aware, obviously, of what could potentially be fake news and how to recognize that. And that's a whole skill in and of itself. But no, thank you, Ali. This was really helpful. And thanks so much for your time. It was great to have you on, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You have a great day as well.
Thank you so much for that, Ali. Now, there were a few big things I took away from my talk with Ali Churko, and I want to use them to guide our conversation. The first major point she had was that people who work in ag or science know the truth about what we do and don't generally succumb to misinformation just because they know better, right? But she said the further away people get from it, the more likely they are to succumb to false information and fake news. Ali and Tyler, I want to follow that theme and ask you what sort of myths and misinformation you guys encounter. Tyler, let's start with you. You have over 355,000 TikTok followers, as I mentioned earlier. That's massive. Now, you use this platform to talk about what you do on the farm and why it's important. I just want to show people your TikTok page just really quickly. If you go to TikTok.com, search Tyler's name, Tyler Heppel, you'll see all his TikTok posts here. Sorry, I'm in my early 40s, so I'm not sure what these are called. I know tweets are called tweets. I don't know if these are called TikToks or TikTok videos, but there you are. So feel free to go to TikTok.com and check out Tyler's information. Now, Tyler, I'm curious why you were inspired to take to TikTok to advocate for our industry. What sort of misinformation were you encountering online that you felt you had to respond to in this way?
So I originally created a TikTok because we were trying to save some land that the federal government was trying to develop. So I really wanted to raise awareness for our petition. And that was the only reason. I didn't think I would get any followers from it. I just knew it had potential for a lot of people to see it. And then all of a sudden, I had a bunch of followers, and I decided I really wanted to educate the end consumer on what everything looks like in the farm. Because there is a lot of misinformation on the farm. And one of the big things that's really near and dear to my heart is how much food waste happens on the farm level and really around the world. And one of a big driver that I see on the farm that contributes to food waste is product that doesn't look perfect, but is perfectly fine to eat. And that's getting thrown out. So I think one of the biggest misinformations is just because like a potato or a carrot or a vegetable looks ugly doesn't mean it's not nutritious and tastes the same. And my grandpa has always said that here in North America, we're way more picky because we haven't gone through a war. If you go look over in Europe, there's way less food waste because they don't care as much about the looks of the produce. So as a next generation farmer, I'm trying to educate the end consumer that just because vegetables might not look perfect doesn't mean you can't eat them. So that's kind of one of my biggest driving forces for the TikTok account.
Now, Ali, you spend a good chunk of your day on social media. Now, Ali Churko said that the further removed from the farm people get, the more susceptible they tend to be to misinformation and myths about agriculture. Now, you yourself, Ali, don't come from an ag background, but now you find yourself immersed in it each and every day. What are some of the big ag myths that you encounter in your daily work?
Yeah, I think it goes to the point of what the other Ali said as well is with the accounts that I work on for Seed Roll Group, obviously the people that we're following are industry experts, farmers, seed companies. And so most of those individuals have a really good grasp on the industry. That's their job to know all of these things and know fact from fiction. They're the people that are working on it. So I don't usually see a lot of misconceptions spread, but I think it does bring up a really important point for anyone with social media is to be aware of who you're following. For example, on the Seed Roll Group channels, I'm following those experts, and so the information I'm seeing is primarily fact. And so for my personal accounts, when you're scrolling through and are seeing tweets, TikToks, Facebook posts, whatever, those are what's going to be top of mind, the people that you're following. Unless on TikTok, I know that you get the For You page, but a lot of that stuff is based on stuff that you interact with and that you've liked in the past. And so I think in the battle to stop the spread of misinformation, that's a big key is to be aware of what you're exposing yourself to, and to be intentional on who you're following and the content that you're going to see day to day.
And Tyler, is there one big myth or piece of misinformation that you encounter as sort of your number one maybe pet peeve when you're on social media that you feel a need to respond to on a regular basis, or something that just jumps out at you as sort of the biggest misunderstanding about potato farming or something like that?
Yeah, I get a lot of comments about vertical farming and why aren't we looking at using vertical farming for potatoes and root vegetables. And I have visited a few vertical farms, and they're great. I think that a good part of the agricultural industry will be vertical farms, but they don't work for vegetables. It's not an efficient way to farm indoors. It's not an efficient way or cost-effective way, really, to farm. So I get that comment a lot, and I've been meaning to make a video more so addressing it. But I do think that there will be a ton of technology breakthroughs in the next few years here in the farming industry. I just don't think that vertical farming is something that we'll see really make a big effect for another decade.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Now, Ali, I'm like you in that I don't come from an ag background myself. I know when I first got into this industry, there were myths that I sort of took for granted as being true. For example, GMOs. I believed what I often read online and heard in the media, that, the jury was still out in regard to the safety of GMOs. And I had heard about people wanting to ban GMOs, so I thought, well, there must be something not totally safe about them. If there's this discussion going on that we should ban GMOs, then there must be an issue with them. And it turns out the truth is very different, right? And for you, Ali, what's been one of the most surprising things you've learned since you began working in this area? Is there one thing that before you started working with Seed World Group that maybe you thought was true, but then once you started working in agriculture, like on a daily basis, you found out that, oh, actually, that's not what I thought it was at all?
Yeah, I'm like you, where GMOs were a very big one. And just to share a personal story, when I first began working here, one of the first stories that I wrote was actually one on gene editing. And in the story, I was using interchangeably gene editing and then gene modification, because I wasn't trying to spread misinformation or had a personal agenda. It was just more so I had never been told that these things are different. And so I think the biggest thing, other than just learning, looking at the facts and understanding the differences between the two, was also understanding the reasoning behind why you know genetically modified foods and gene edited crops are being created. And it's because scientists and researchers are trying to find a way to kind of combat climate change and make sure that we have enough food to feed the world. And so it's not for a secret agenda. It's to kind of make those crops be able to adapt in those different climates. And really knowing the reasoning behind it has helped me see the full picture. And it was pretty eye opening. And even before coming here, I had no clue that a plant breeder was a job or a career path. And so I think that that's another important piece as well, to understand that there's teams of people and researchers that are working to help benefit the whole world. And an article that I read that really helped too was actually by European Seeds editor Marcel Bruins, and he compared plant breeders to the Avengers that are saving the world. And so that's one of the biggest misconceptions. And then another one is the organic versus conventional. I actually did a Seed Speaks episode on that. And the biggest piece that I would share was actually from one of the panelists, Nate Powell-Palm, and he was sharing that it's not conventional versus organic, which is how I always thought of it. I mean, I didn't even know it was called conventional farming. I just knew there was regular and there's organic. And the biggest piece he said is that both are great options and both are working together to fight hunger and to make sure we have enough food to feed the world. So yeah, I would say the biggest two are the GMOs and organic versus conventional.
Now, I want to tackle fake news quickly. There's so much information online. Some of it comes from good sources, a lot of it doesn't. Tyler, what's your number one tip for people on how they can tell if this is good objective information. Maybe it's slanted a bit, maybe the person's giving their opinion, and that's fine, but how can you tell a difference if it's, good objective information that they can rely on, or if it's just information that is just not true and is just really designed to just completely manipulate them? Tyler, what's your number one tip for how to tell the difference?
I think the number one tip would just be to not make up your mind right away. I think the first Allie nailed it on the head when she said a lot of people will see a video or get a little bit of information and make up their mind right away. And I think there's three sides to every story and even every fact. And I think the most important thing is when you see a video that compels you on anything really in life, and you feel strongly convicted to it, look on the other side, because the way that social media is set up these days, if you interact with that video, it's just going to show you more and more videos like this. So we've seen it time and time again where social media is just an echo chamber, right? So it's just going to show you what you want to see. So I guess my biggest tip for everyone would be, don't make up your mind after the first video you see or the first fact you see. Go look at the other side and read the other side with an open mind. And try to get a better understanding of it and come up with your own understanding. Maybe the truth lies in between the middle of both the videos you saw or both all the information you're reading. So don't make up your mind right away. Look at all the sides and realize that the way that the algorithms are set up in social media is designed to be an echo chamber. And I'm not going to get into politics, but that is why we see a lot of division and people who are on polar opposite sides of the spectrum on issues.
Yes, the almighty algorithm, isn't it a wonderful thing? Allie, how about you? What's your top tip for people on how to tell the difference between something that might be useful information and something that's just outright fake news?
Yeah, just to build off of what both Tyler and the other Ally said as well, is just checking your sources and making sure you see the full picture. Because with social media, since it is so rapid and a lot of platforms have the limit of the amount of words you can put in posts, you're usually only getting, a small snapshot of the full picture. And so while the statement could be true, it could have been taken out of context. And so I think it's important to not only check where it came from, so go on that person's profile, do they look legit, where are they getting their sources from, but then also, again, like Tyler said, to look on all sides and get a full picture before then kind of coming to your own conclusion of what you believe is true from seeing all of the facts.
Now, before we sign off for the day, I asked Ali Churko how she goes about having productive conversations with people in person when it comes to busting agriculture myths. Obviously, you don't want to make people defensive or patronize them or talk down to them or make them uncomfortable in some way. You don't want to come across as a know-it-all or anything like that, right? And so I'm curious how you guys communicate in an effective way to get your message across. Tyler, how do you do that? How do you talk to people so that you don't make them feel defensive or anything like that?
Especially when it's face to face or in person, I listen more than I speak. I think a lot of times at the end of the day, someone just wants to be heard. And once they feel that they're heard, they'll be more susceptible to opening their mind to what you're saying and being more reasonable.
And Allie, I'll give you the last word. How do you effectively communicate with other people about these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts. I think while Tyler probably has a lot more experience on this, obviously there's going to be the people especially on the internet, that are only disagreeing with things or spreading misinformation because they want that attention. And so I think in those cases, the best option is just to continue sharing the truth on Tyler's platform, on the Seed Roll Group platforms, and getting the correct information out there to kind of help balance out the misinformation. But again, I agree, just go about the conversation respectfully. No one wants to be approached and yelled at and told they're wrong. So listen to their side of the story. Most likely they've come to that conclusion because of something they've heard. So just coming at them with the facts, give them resources, and then give them the space to then decide if they want to pursue it further. I mean, you can't make someone believe something that they don't want to. So the best you can do is just provide them with the facts and do it respectfully.
Yeah, exactly. Good points. No, thank you very much, guys, for joining me today. Wonderful information. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
That's
Mark.
all
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have today. To check out Ali Roden's social media work, visit Seed World or Germination Magazine on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. You can visit Tyler on TikTok by going to tiktok.com. Just type his name into the search box. His first name's Tyler, last name is HEPPELL. Join us next week when host Ashley Robinson tackles the red barn myth. This is Marc Zienkiewicz signing off.